Good evening, everyone. We are just about ready to get started. It is 7 o'clock, but we're going to give folks a little bit more time to get logged on. And in another minute or so, we'll go ahead and start the presentation. All right, good evening again, everyone, and welcome to this virtual design public hearing for the Compton Road Shared Use Path Project. My name is Andy Beecher, and I'm one of VDOT's preliminary engineering managers in the Northern Virginia District. We're glad that you could join us for this meeting tonight, and we look forward to receiving your input and feedback. Before we move on, I want to note that we will be recording this meeting for future reference. And next, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the elected officials who have joined us this evening. And I believe that we do have Supervisor Kathy Smith online tonight. Supervisor Smith, would you like to make any remarks?
Andy, just briefly, I wanted to thank you for putting on this meeting for the community, and I look forward to the presentation and hearing any questions from the community. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you very much, Supervisor Smith. I did also want to recognize Mr. Tom Bashadny, who is the Director of Fairfax County's Department of Transportation, and he has also joined us this evening. Go ahead to the next slide, please. So tonight we are holding this public hearing virtually using a virtual meeting platform. Despite not meeting in person, it is our intent to convey using this virtual platform, along with information from the project website, the same information that we otherwise would, including key project information, the process for submitting comments, and key points of contact. Next slide, please. This evening, the meeting will be divided into two parts. The first part will consist of the presentation, and then this will be followed by an opportunity for questions and comments. We'll be taking both written and verbal questions during the Q&A period. For written questions in the virtual meeting control panel, you should have a questions box that will allow you to submit your question or comment. And if you'd like to ask a verbal question, you can select the raise your hand button. The moderator will call on you when it's your turn to ask your question. And if you're asking a verbal question, we'll need to unmute you, and then we'll ask you to unmute yourself before panelists and attendees will be able to hear you. Next slide, please. So here's our agenda for this evening. We'll start out with the project team introductions, to be followed by background information, project location and overview. We'll then discuss the project design, the right-of-way and environmental processes, the preliminary cost estimate, schedule, next steps, and then finally we'll take questions and comments. Next slide, please. Here's our project team. First off, we have Mr. Nick Roper, who is VDOT's Northern Virginia District Project Development Engineer. We have myself, Jenny Ha, who is VDOT's Project Manager from our Location and Design section. Kevin Hurt is VDOT's Consultant Project Manager, and Dan Stevens is Fairfax County's Project Coordinator. And at this time, I'll go ahead and turn the presentation over to Kevin Hurt to discuss the project. Kevin?
Thanks, Andy. As mentioned, my name is Kevin Hurt, and I'm the Consultant Project Manager for the project. First, I would like to walk through the surrounding trail network, and then we'll review the project design. For this project, VDOT and Fairfax County are working together to construct the Compton Road Shared Use Path. It will provide connectivity between the Bull Run Special Events Center and the Cub Run Trail system, as well as other trails in the area. The intent of this project is to improve mobility and travel choices for pedestrians and bicyclists in the area, and will include a bridge over Cub Run to safely facilitate the shared use path over the river. The shared use path will also provide a connection to the surrounding existing and/or future trails, which will be discussed in the presentation. A virtual public hearing meeting was held for this project on December 9th, 2021. Next slide. Now I'd like to discuss the I-66 trail network and how this project will be integrated into that. As shown on this slide, the I-66 trail network is extensive, and this project provides a connection to this trail, as shown in the left of the slide. Next slide. This slide shows the trail network in the area, including the Bull Run Loop Trail, Sully Loop Trail, and the West County Trail. It also shows how the project will be integrated with each, as shown on this slide. Next slide. As mentioned on the previous slide, this graphic shows a more detailed view of the direct connection between the project and the surrounding trails adjacent to the project. The Cub Run Trail, which connects to the Sully Loop Trail, is shown in red. The West County Natural Trail, which connects to the Bull Run Loop Trail, is shown in green. Along the southern side of the project, the Compton Road shared use path will provide a connection to future trails that are under development along Compton Road and points south, shown in purple. Furthermore, the pedestrian and cyclist improvements to Mount Olive Road are currently not funded, and no schedule has been established for their construction. FCDOT will be pursuing funding for the pedestrian and cyclist improvements to Mount Olive Road going into the future. This slide also shows the three sections of the shared use path. The first portion will be constructed north of the I-66 bridges over Compton Road. The second portion is currently under construction and is located under the I-66 bridges as a part of the Transform 66 project. And the third portion will be constructed south of the I-66 bridges. This slide also shows the proposed path crossing Compton Road at the Bull Run Special Events Center Drive. Next slide. Building off the previous slide, we wanted to discuss the three sections in more detail. The shared use path south of I-66 is a section that will be constructed south of the I-66 bridges to the Bull Run Special Event Center Drive, including a crossing of Compton Road. The shared use path will be approximately 430 feet long and 10 feet wide. The shared use path north of I-66 is a section that will be constructed north of the 66 bridges and will provide a connection with the existing Cub Run Trail. This segment includes items that will add to the construction duration, which are the bridge over Cub Run and a waterline relocation due to the project fill slopes. The shared use path will be approximately 380 feet long and 10 feet wide. Next slide, please. This slide shows the shared use path layout south of the I-66 bridges. The path is shown in gray. Also shown here is the path crossing Compton Road at the Bull Run Special Event Center Drive. Note the section call out AA, which we will discuss on the next slide. This is a cross-sectional view of the area, and as shown, the path will be 10 feet wide and will have a minimum 2-foot graded shoulder and ditches on each side as required to prevent the stormwater runoff from crossing the path. The section will also shows shoulder improvements along Compton Road to improve the Compton Road shoulders in this area. Next slide, please. This slide shows a section of shared use path that is currently under construction under the I-66 bridges. Note the section call out BB, which we will discuss on the next slide. This is a cross-section view of the area, and as shown, the path will have a similar 10 feet wide width. Also, a 3-foot buffer will be provided between the required handrail and retaining wall in this section. This is a constrained area, and the path is required to fit between the newly constructed retaining walls and bridge piers. Next slide. This is a current construction photo looking to the north towards Cub Run. The recently constructed wall is shown on the right, and the bridge piers are shown on the left. The shared use path in this section is planned to be complete in 2022 or early 2023. Next slide. The next section is north of the I-66 bridges, and this is a transition section between the path that is currently under construction and the bridge that is required to cross Cub Run. This area has steep terrain and a large fill section that will be required for the path leading up to the bridge. A handrail will be provided for safety due to the elevation difference between the proposed path and the existing ground. This area will also have a guardrail to protect pedestrians and bicyclists from vehicles on Compton Road. Next, note the section call out CC, which we will discuss on the next slide. This slide also notes a guardrail opening that would be provided for access to the existing West County Natural Trail. Next slide. This is a section view of the area, and as shown, the guardrail will be installed on the left and a handrail on the right. The path is 10 feet wide, and a 3-foot buffer is shown between the path and the handrail. Next slide. The final section includes the bridge over Cub Run, which will accommodate the shared use path. A barrier will be provided on the bridge to separate the path from the vehicles traveling on Compton Road. To build this section, it is likely that traffic will be reduced to 1 lane during portions of the construction with a temporary signal. To improve constructability and to reduce impacts to traffic, the VDOT design team is evaluating a separate bridge structure for the shared use path that will be constructed adjacent to the existing bridge with a planned 5-foot separation. The new abutments will be added to support the shared use path bridge and will be designed to accommodate flooding of Cub Run. In addition, this slide also shows how the Compton Road shared use path will connect to the existing Cub Run Trail. Due to the elevation differences between the proposed and existing path, reconstruction work along the Cub Run Trail will be required for the connection as a part of this project. It is anticipated that handrails will be required for this portion of the existing Cub Run Trail for elevation differences or slopes. The portion of proposed Compton Road shared use path north of the bridge over Cub Run will also need handrails due to elevation concern. Note the cross-section call out DD, which we will discuss on the next slide. This is a section view of the shared use path bridge over Cub Run. The path will be 10 feet wide with a 2-foot buffer between the edge of the path and the bridge barrier. As mentioned before, you can see where the barrier will be provided between Compton Road and the path for safety. Now I'd like to turn it over to Jenny to discuss the proposed right-of-way acquisitions. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Kevin. We have identified that this project will require purchase of land from adjacent property owners. This is known to us as acquisition of right-of-way. We have identified that 3 proposed partial acquisitions are required. The proposed partial acquisitions are 1 residence lot, Northern Virginia Regional Park Authority, and the Fairfax County Park Authority. These impacts are subject to change as the final design is developed. Utility easements are not shown at this time. Each property acquisition is unique and is discussed on a case-by-case basis after the right-of-way notice to proceed. You can read up on the process from the pamphlet which is referenced here. Next slide, please. All projects that VDOT complete undergo an environmental review process. For federally funded project, this is known specifically as NEPA process, which stands for National Environmental Policy Act of 1969. As you can see here, NEPA is considered an umbrella act that covers multiple environmental impacts. For example, listed under umbrella you can see for archaeology and architecture, Section 106 of National Historical Preservation Act for wetlands, Section 404 of the Clean Water Act for wildlife, Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act, and many more. Each federally funded project will have a corresponding NEPA document that demonstrates compliance or no impact to this policy. The level of NEPA documents is determined based on significance of impact. This project qualifies for a programmatic category exclusion, PCE, due to very limited impacts, and the PCE is being prepared. Next slide, please. Here is our anticipated schedule for this project. Following tonight's virtual public hearing meeting, we are planning for a design approval to occur in fall 2022. We expect to start right-of-way acquisition and utility relocation in spring 2023. And finally, construction will start in summer 2024. Approximate construction duration was estimated with 20 months. The schedule displayed here will be subject to change with the project development. When possible, we do look at ways to accelerate the project to construction. Next slide, please. So this slide shows our estimated project cost. Our current overall estimated cost is $7.9 million, with an estimated $1.5 million for preliminary engineering, $1.1 million for right-of-way and utility, and $5.3 million for construction. The project is financed with federal, state, and local funds. The current allocated funding is approximately $4.5 million, with $3.4 million pending. Estimates are subject to change as the project design develops. Next slide, please. So following tonight's virtual public hearing meeting, the public comment deadline will be on July 11. As mentioned on the schedule slide, next steps are to get the design approval in fall this year. We anticipate beginning right-of-way acquisition and utility relocation in spring 2023. And I will now turn it over to Carol Sinclair to lead us in how to submit comments.
Thank you, Jenny. This slide shows the ways in which you can submit feedback on this project. We'll be accepting comments through July the 11th. You can submit comments by emailing us at meetingcomments@vdot.virginia.gov using the reference Compton Road Shared Use Path in the subject line. You can also leave a voicemail by calling 703-259-2907. You can also mail our project manager, Jenny Ha, at Virginia's Northern Virginia District Office, 4975 Alliance Drive, Fairfax, Virginia, 22030. You can also provide comments through our website or tonight during our Q&A session. And finally, if you would like, you can request an in-person meeting by contacting the project manager at 703-259-2907. Next slide, please. Thank you. As a reminder, during our Q&A session, we'll be taking both written and verbal questions. In your control panel, there is a question pane that will allow you to submit written questions. If you would like to ask a verbal question, you can select the Raise Your Hand button. I will call on you when it's your turn to ask your question. If you're asking a verbal question, we will need to unmute you, and then you will need to unmute yourself before everyone will be able to hear you. Once you ask your verbal question, please remember to lower your hand by clicking the Raise Your Hand button again. As we stated at the beginning of the presentation, all participants will be muted. And if you get disconnected, please attempt to rejoin. Next slide, please. Okay, so our plan for tonight's public hearing is that we're going to start off with some of the written questions we've received in the written question box in the order they were received, and will also provide an opportunity for attendees to ask verbal questions. For those who ask verbal questions, please keep your questions succinct to allow for more questions to be asked. And if an attendee is called in using a phone, you are in listen-only mode and are not able to ask a verbal question. However, you can submit questions via email, regular mail, or by calling the project manager, as described earlier in the presentation. Just as a reminder, this is a public hearing and all comments and questions will become part of the public hearing documentation. So, we would like to open it up. We have our first question. Is from Paul, who has concerns about this not having complete funding. Kevin, would you like to answer his question, please?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I think, Jenny, would you like to address that question?
And Kevin, Tom Bashadny is on. He may be best to address the specifics of the additional funding.
Okay. And Tom,
I'm happy to take the question. So there's funding right now to continue with the design. And in the meantime, the county is looking for multiple funding opportunities to fund the balance of the project. There's a number of grant programs that the county is applying for, and will continue to do that until we have the project fully funded. In the meantime, the design can continue and land acquisition can continue with the funding that's already available.
Thank you, Tom. Our next question comes from Bill, who wants to know, for the West County Trail crossing of Compton Road, north of I-66, will there be signage alerting motorists of the trail crossing?
And so as we discussed in the presentation, there will be an opening for the guardrail on each side. And the project team is evaluating any additional measures at that location. But as of right now, there are just guardrail openings at that location.
Thank you, Kevin. We don't have any other questions coming in right now, just at this time. But just a reminder, you can raise your hand if you want to ask a verbal question or type your questions into the question pane. If you need us to show a slide that you were unclear on, just ask us and we can pull that slide back up. This is a follow-up to Paul's earlier question, and he asks, so there is a chance that this project will not be funded. Tom, would you like to clarify that?
Yes, sure, Carol. So we will continue to look for sources of funding until the project is fully funded. So this project is on the county's transportation priority plan, and so we will continue to look for funding until it's funded. So no, there is not a chance that the project will not be funded.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Thomas. He wants to know, will additional bridge supports be required regardless of whether the shared use path across the bridge is connected or separate?
And thank you for the question. I believe you're referencing abutments for the bridge. And yes, there will be additional abutments that are needed for the shared use path. And that will not change whether it's slightly separated structure or if it's connected.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm waiting for more questions to be asked. So please type your question in the questions pane. Or raise your hand to ask a verbal question. As a reminder, we are taking comments through July 11th. So those of you who would like to submit comments by emailing us your comments at meetingcomments@vdot.virginia.gov. I know that I recognize the value of people's time. We do want to answer any questions, but if maybe we'll give this maybe until 7:30 to see if anybody has other questions. We do have a question coming in from Thomas, who asks, in support of the question regarding signage at the Bull Run Park access road crossing, has a traffic study been done on the visibility of northbound traffic for those crossing Compton Road? It is a fairly blind curve, if I recall correctly. Kevin, can you answer that question, please?
Yeah, I can. And again, thanks for the question. So there was a number of different options that we looked at for that crossing there, and I would agree it definitely is a constrained area. But looking through the different options, the current crossing as shown, there were a site distance analysis that was done, and so we feel that location is the best from a site distance perspective and also from a signage perspective, and not getting that crossing too far away from the Bull Run Special Events Center as well. So
Thank you, Kevin. Why don't we go back to the slide that shows how people can make comments if they want to make them after this meeting. There's 5 different ways: emailing us, leaving a voicemail, mailing us. You can do the comments that were on the web page or during the meeting tonight. And also if you want to request an in-person meeting by contacting the project manager at the phone number given there. Those are the 5 ways to contact us to make your comments part of the public record. We do have Paul who's thanked us for our time tonight. Thank you, Paul. Do we have anybody else who would like to ask a verbal question or to type in a written question? We still have those available. We'll get a few more minutes. Give it till about 2 more minutes till about 7:32. We do have a comment from Mary who thanks us for the information. She says, we look forward to construction completion and a safe walking path for our family. Thank you, Mary, for your comment.
All right, well, thank you, Carol. It looks like we've not received any further questions.
Andy, we do have one more that just came in.
Okay.
Yep. So we have a question that comes from Thomas, who wants to know, will access to the Cub Run Trail system from Compton Road be maintained through construction?
And I'll take that one, Carol. So as of right now, that is essentially a dead end for the Cub Run Trail system at the moment. So the design team, we're looking through options that could provide potentially a temporary connection. But at this time, there will be a time where we'll need to make that, as we described in the presentation. There's an elevation difference between the proposed Cub Run Trail and the existing, the proposed Compton Road shared use path and the existing Cub Run Trail. So there will be a time where those two connections will need to occur. So we are looking at ways to provide temporary connection, but at this time there will likely be some temporary closures to make that connection.
Thank you, Kevin. Do we have anybody else who would like to ask a question, verbal or written? We'll give it till 7:35. I do want to give it just a few more minutes. Okay, it looks like we don't have any more questions being submitted. I don't see anybody's hands being raised, so we're going to go ahead and conclude the question and answer portion of our meeting. I'm going to turn it back over to Andy.
All right, well, thank you very much, Carol. With that, we are going to go ahead and conclude our meeting this evening. If you would like to view the presentation again or would like to share it with friends or neighbors, it can be found on the project website along with a recording of tonight's meeting. As a reminder, comments are due by Monday, July 11th. So on behalf of VDOT and Fairfax County, we want to sincerely thank you for your participation and feedback. And we look forward to continuing to work with the community as this project moves towards implementation. So with that, thank you all and good night.